Let's talk about that moment of panic. You glance at the clock, 6 questions left, but only 2 minutes to go. So you start bubbling in random answers. A, C, C, D, B, whatever. You're not even reading anymore. You're just surviving. But here's the truth. Speed is not the problem. Clarity is. Most students try to go faster by rushing, reading quicker, skipping steps, cutting corners, but of course, that never works. Why? Because the LSAT isn't testing how fast you can read. It's testing how clearly you can think while you're under pressure. If you move fast without clarity, you just get more questions wrong more quickly. Speed isn't a skill you develop directly. Speed is a natural result of clear, structured thinking. Once you're confident in your process, the speed shows up on its own. So let's go deeper on what's really happening when you feel slow or stuck on the LSAT. It's not that you're reading too slowly, it's that your working memory is getting overwhelmed. Working memory is the part of your brain that juggles information in real time, kind of like the RAM in a computer. Once it gets overloaded, everything slows down. You start rereading. You forget what the question was even asking. You second-guess choices that you already eliminated. And here's how this actually plays out on test day. You read a stimulus, but you don't quite get it, so you reread it. Then you read a question stem, and it doesn't match your mental model. So now you're confused. Then you look at the choices, and instead of filtering, you try to hold A, B, and C in your head while you check back on the stimulus. Meanwhile, the clock is still ticking, and now you're feeling pressure. Now, you're not just solving the question, you're also managing stress. That's 5 tabs open minimum. Now, imagine doing that for every single question on the test. No wonder people feel overwhelmed halfway through a section. They're trying to hold everything in their head while also solving questions, and that just isn't sustainable. Here's what high scorers do differently. They build systems to reduce cognitive load. They do things in order. They read the stimulus with 100% focus, not rushing, not zoning out, one clean read. Then they pause and process. They ask themselves, what is the core argument or structure? Then they reframe the question type in their head before even looking at the choices. Finally, they read the choices one at a time and make a decision on each. Not maybe, not let me hold on to this and come back, just a simple yes or no. This prevents that cognitive overload. They're not multitasking. They are following a checklist, one clean decision at a time. Let me give you an analogy. You walk into a messy room with clothing all over the floor, dishes in the sink, and books stacked everywhere. If you try to do everything at once, fold clothes, wash dishes, organize books, you're going to get overwhelmed and probably stop halfway. But if you say, first I'll do the clothes, then the dishes, then the books, you finish everything faster and better. Same idea here. Every time you slow down to process clearly, just for a few seconds, you save yourself minutes later by avoiding confusion, backtracking, and indecision. So your real job on the LSAT isn't just answering questions. It's managing your brain's bandwidth. If your thinking feels slow, scattered, or foggy, the fix isn't more speed, the fix is better mental organization. So close the extra tabs, reduce your mental clutter, and suddenly you're faster than you've ever been without. Questions are presented in a general order of difficulty. This means that time management is your friend. You can aim to complete the first 10 questions in roughly 10 to 12 minutes. Since those are the easier types of questions, you then build up a time bank that you can apply to the tougher questions later in the section. You have an average time allotment of approximately 123 to 125 per question, but of course, not all of them are equal difficulty. They get progressively more difficult as the section goes on. So you want to be able to apply that time bank to the tougher questions later in the section, roughly questions 15 through 23 or so. The last couple may be slightly easier, but of course, lock up those easy points first by approaching the questions in the order given. Now, you may find there are a couple of questions, say 3 to 5, that you want to flag and skip, planning to come back to them later. That's totally fine. I'll personally flag 3 to 5 difficult questions in a single logical reasoning section, trusting in my time management skills that I've built over having taken several dozen timed logical reasoning sections, knowing that I'll get to the end of the section with time to spare to go back and handle those tougher questions that I flagged initially. But the first 10 questions, those are your gimmies. Trust your gut on those. Don't second guess. Let's destroy a myth right now. Skipping questions does not mean you're falling behind. It means you're thinking like a high scorer. Most students treat the LSAT like a straight line. Start at question 1, end at question 25, do them one by one, no exceptions. But the thing is, the LSAT is not linear, so your approach shouldn't be either. And top scorers understand this. They treat the test like a series of opportunities, not a to-do list. And when something looks like a bad use of time, they skip it instantly. But they don't skip randomly, they skip strategically. Let me show you what this actually looks like. Because certain question types are notorious time traps. Parallel reasoning questions have long arguments in the stimulus and in every answer choice. Principle strengthening questions are often abstract and dense. And any question that's badly worded or filled with conditional logic can eat up your time fast. Even the occasional reading comp passage, if it's full of technical jargon or legal philosophy, it might take double the time of a normal one. So here's what you want to do. If you hit a question and you're still confused after 30 seconds, you flag it and skip it. You don't pause to think, maybe just one more read. You don't argue with yourself about whether to stay. You just flag it and you go. Because the real cost of overcommitting to one hard question isn't just the time it takes, it's the opportunity cost of everything you won't get to later. So imagine this. You spend 3 minutes on question number 18. You finally pick D, and you're not even sure if it's right. Now you've got 6 questions left. One of them was a softball. One you would have nailed in 45 seconds. But now you're out of time. And the worst part is, you might have gotten number 18 wrong anyway. Now, I once worked with a student named James. He was scoring in the mid-150s, kept running out of time on logical reasoning. So we reviewed his prep test and found something consistent. Every time he hit a tough parallel question around number 17 or 18, he would lock in. He'd reread, analyze, and debate every answer. Then he'd run out of time and miss 22 through 25, even though they were easier. So I gave him one simple rule. If a question feels like a project, flag it and skip it. He didn't love this idea at first. It felt like giving up to him. But within 2 weeks, his score jumped 7 points. Why? Because he was finally playing to win, not trying to be perfect. And of course, James's results are not typical. Your results may vary. He put in a tremendous amount of effort, and he was the kind of student who actually took the strategies and executed them consistently. But this just shows you what's possible when you are willing to try something different. So if you want to skip like a pro, here is the checklist. First, give yourself permission. Skipping is not failure, it's part of the strategy. 2, set a 30-second rule. If you're not making progress, move on. Number 3, know your traps. Keep a personal list of question types or phrasing that tend to slow you down. And finally, trust the return trip. If time allows, you're going to come back with a clearer head and sometimes solve it in 20 seconds. Skipping is not about avoiding hard work. It's about maximizing results under pressure. You've got 35 minutes per section. Use them where they're going to make the biggest impact. And remember, your score doesn't care when you answer the questions. It only cares if you get the training. Now, most LSAT students make the same mistake. They treat every question like it deserves the same amount of time. 90 seconds per question, 35 minutes per section. Divide and conquer. Sounds fair, right? Wrong. That is like giving equal time to your best friend and a stranger trying to sell you crypto in a parking lot. Not every conversation is worth your attention. And not every LSAT question is worth your time. The LSAT isn't fair. Some questions are straight up gifts. Others are traps. If you spend equal time on both, you're going to lose. The fix is confidence-based timing. Now you're probably wondering, what does that actually mean? Here's the rule. Spend more time on questions you're likely to get right and spend less time on questions you're likely to get wrong. It might sound counterintuitive, but it's how top scorers play. Let's break it down. When you hit a question that feels familiar, meaning you understand the argument, you know the question type, you've seen this pattern in your drills, that is a 10 out of 10 confidence question. Trust yourself, move quickly, and don't overthink. That question is a green light. Bank the time. Now, let's say you hit a question that feels iffy. You kind of get the argument, but something feels off. You're not totally sure what the stimulus is doing. That is a 5 out of 10 confidence question. So you slow down a little and try to apply your process. But if things still feel murky after 30 to 40 seconds, flag it and move on. And then there are the dreaded 1 out of 10 confidence questions, the ones that hit you like a brick wall. Maybe it's filled with conditional logic you've never seen before. Maybe the wording is convoluted and the choices all sound the same. You know what to do here. Move on. You are not required to suffer through that question in the moment. And here's the magic. If time allows, you can come back with a clearer head. You don't need to be a hero, but you do need to be efficient. Now, I once worked with a student named Aisha. She had plateaued at a 161. When we reviewed her tests, one pattern kept showing up. Question number 18 in logical reasoning. Every single time. She would sink in 4 minutes and still get it wrong. Why? Because she could not let go. She did not want to give up. She thought, I'm already in this deep, I might as well stay. And that thinking cost her time. And it cost her easy points at the end of the section. So we changed her approach. She labeled every question in real time using a simple system. A check for confident 10 out of 10s, an exclamation point for shaky 5 out of 10s, and a slash through it for total 1 out of 10s. She flew through the checks, gave reasonable effort on the exclamation points, and skipped the slashes until the end. That shift alone unlocked time for 4 more questions she had previously been missing. Her next test was a 170. She didn't get faster, but she got smarter about where she spent her time. Now, of course, disclaimer, your results may vary. Aisha was a unique individual, she was especially coachable, and she put in a tremendous amount of work. But I share her story here to show you what is possible when you are willing to adopt a different kind of strategy. So consider building this into your process. Try it on your next section. Notice your gut reaction. You're going to feel it within the first 10 seconds. And decide early. If it's 10 out of 10, go. If it's a 1 out of 10, flag it and skip it. And if it's a 5, give it a chance, but watch the clock carefully. And of course, keep moving. You can always come back, but you can't get back the time you wasted. Timing is not just about minutes and seconds. It's about where you choose to invest your attention. Top scorers are not racing against the clock, they are managing their focus. And once you learn to time your confidence, not just the question number, you stop try to speed through it. That's a big mistake though. Here's why reading faster hurts your score. First, you miss key transitions. A single word like however or despite can flip the meaning of an entire paragraph. If you miss it, you're screwed. Second, you don't retain the structure. You get to the questions, but then you have to reread everything, wasting even more time. And the LSAT actually punishes speed readers. They intentionally hide trap answers for people who skim. Now, a real story I wanted to share with you. One of my students, Mike, was a fast reader. He blazed through passages in under 3 minutes, but his accuracy was trash. But when we slowed him down and focused on the structure, his reading comp accuracy jumped from 60% to 90% without taking any extra time. The fix here is to read for structure, not details. Instead of the speed, focus on the main argument, what the passage is actually about. Focus on the role of each paragraph, whether it's providing evidence, arguing a point, or explaining a study, and of course the author's tone. Is the author neutral, supportive, or critical? When you get the structure right, the details fall into place. Now, reading comprehension is where time really disappears for most people. And if that's you, you're not alone. It's dense, it's abstract, and worst of all, there's a false sense of security. You'll think you're doing fine until the clock says you have 2 minutes left and 2 passages to go. But here's the good news. You don't need to read faster, you need to read differently. Let's break it down. Most students read LSAT passages the same way they read a textbook, looking for facts, definitions, technical terms, and examples. But the LSAT doesn't care if you remember what year the scientists published their findings. It cares whether you understand why the author told you about the scientists in the first place. That's the difference between reading for detail and reading for structure. Details are the trees, structure is the map. When you read for structure, you don't get lost. You know where everything is. So when a question asks, what's the author's main point? Or why did the second paragraph mention X? You know exactly where to go. That's what high scorers are doing that other students aren't. They're not memorizing the passage, they're tracking how the ideas are being presented and why. So let's get tactical for a minute. When reading the passage, train yourself to spot 4 things: the author's opinion, the function of each paragraph, shifts in tone or direction, and the big picture. Let's talk author's opinion. You want to know, is the author neutral, skeptical, supportive, or confused? Most passages are not information dumps, they are arguments in disguise. Now, function of each paragraph. Paragraph 1 oftentimes sets the scene by providing background. Paragraph 2 might introduce conflict or contrast. The later paragraphs will dive into examples, counter-arguments, or conclusions. You want to train your brain to ask, why is this paragraph here? What role does it serve? When you're looking for shifts in tone or direction, look for keywords like however, but, although, and on the other hand. These signal a pivot, and they are gold, so circle them at least mentally. They'll tell you where the author is adding something important. Now finally, of course, you want to walk away with the big picture. So after you read the whole thing, pause. Summarize the passage in one sentence in your head. For example, you might say, this passage argues that traditional theories of memory are flawed and need to be replaced by a new model. That's your anchor. Now, what can you ignore? Exact numbers, researcher names, specific examples, and technical terminology you don't understand. Those are all bait, so don't let them eat up your time. Now here's a tool that'll change your timing instantly. As you read, keep asking yourself, why did the author include this? How does this paragraph connect to the one before? Is this an opinion, a fact, or an example? And what is the author trying to prove? That checklist turns reading into active processing, not passive intake. And here's the magic. Once you lock in the structure, you almost never need to reread the whole passage. You'll know where to find what you need. You stop scanning, you stop doubting, and you just move. So let's say you finish reading the passage and get a question like, according to the passage, why does the author mention Dr. Chen's research? If you read for detail, you now have to hunt for the name Dr. Chen. Read the whole paragraph again and figure out what's going on. But if you read for structure, you're already going to know, oh yeah, that was the example used to support the claim in paragraph 3. So you jump straight to it. 10 seconds, you're done. That's how high scorers finish reading comp on time. Not by rushing, but by mapping. You might want to take a moment to assess all 4 passages at the beginning of the section to determine which passages line up better with your background knowledge or your interests, in short, which ones seem easier. You might want to tackle these passages first because you're most comfortable with them to lock up those points and build your confidence. So this just involves a quick scan, maybe 10 seconds, skimming each passage to get a general sense of the topic and how difficult it is. Then maybe rank order them, decide how you're going to tackle them based on your comfort level with each one, and allocate your time. So maybe you're going to want to spend a little bit less time on the easier ones to save up more time for the tougher ones that... Now let's bust another myth. Most students think that once they get good at the LSAT, they're going to feel calm and confident through the entire test. They imagine high scorers just breezing through each section with laser focus, no doubt, no panic, no uncertainty. That is a fiction. Even the best test takers still feel stress during the test. They still hit questions that confuse them. They still feel stuck sometimes. And they still have moments where they think to themselves, wait, what? But here's the real difference. They don't panic. They don't spiral. They don't let one question ruin the next 5. They've trained themselves to stick to their process even when things feel uncertain. So let's say you're cruising through logical reasoning and then bam, question 17 hits you like a brick wall. Dense stimulus, weird wording, two choices that both feel kind of right. What does a low scorer do? They stare at it for 3 minutes, trying to force it to make sense. They reread the same sentence 5 times and they start thinking, what if I mess this up? What if the whole test goes bad? That's how time disappears, and confidence along with it. Now, what does a high scorer do? They pause, they breathe, and they remember the system. They flag the question and they move on. They keep executing the rest of the section like nothing happened. No drama, no narrative, just action. The question isn't whether you will hit a hard question, because you will. The question is what you're going to do after it happens. If you wait until test day to learn how to handle stress, it's already too late. The way you practice has to include stress management. So you want to do timed sections more than untimed drills to simulate real conditions. You want to practice skipping when you're confused, even during practice. Don't just push through, train the habit. And track your emotional response. Notice when your brain starts spinning and catch it early. And decompress after every section. Ask yourself, where did I slow down? Where did I lose focus? What triggered it? This isn't woo-woo mindset coaching. This is tactical test strategy. The LSAT rewards emotional discipline as much as logical reasoning. So don't aim to feel perfect. Aim to stay functional, especially when you don't.